All right, everyone. So for sketch 18, kind of similar process to sketch 17, you're going to pick between 2 and 3-point perspective. This time you're going to draw out some sort of building. With this one, I would recommend having even just a loose reference can be really helpful on these. So I'd say find some sort of building that you'd like to draw. If you can, try to find one that gives you kind of a viewpoint of two sides, so you have some detailing to work with each side. And then from there, pretty much it'll be kind of same process that you're thinking of, starting with boxes. So thinking of kind of those initial walls of your building or house. And then once you have those, I'm going to use kind of the X's through those two planes to figure out the height of my roof, where that central point is, and then utilizing that then to figure out kind of how the roof connects over in each of those parts of this building. And then as you work through, it's going to be pretty much same process. As you work through details of your building, you're going to continue to use perspective as you put in doors, windows. As you establish those, I would say kind of start to identify where things are centered within certain walls and where they aren't. Then you can use that X method to help kind of find the center of those at that angle where perspective is kind of going off in space a little bit. And then as you work through, just kind of looking at overall details you see, what are then those key components. I would say kind of get those main features of your building, and then once you have those, kind of starting to go through and making sure that you're getting that accuracy as you go through. And then if you're somebody that is doing that 2-point perspective, it is going to be as you work through, either your lines are going to one of those two vanishing points to establish either the width or depth as it goes out in space. And then height lines will remain the same, where you're using just vertical lines to establish those. Otherwise, as you go through, same as with the boxes, take your time. Let me know if you're having any issues as you are troubleshooting. But as you work through, really just kind of taking that time to get that accuracy. These ones are really about kind of looking at practice before we move to kind of picking out final references and then figuring out kind of final composition for this project. So the more time you take on these ones, the easier it'll be with that final project. And then if you're somebody that is working with 3-point perspective, pretty much same concept. You're going to be looking at that same building or structure. As you work through, instead of having those two vertical lines, now you're going to be referring to that vanishing point. So identify if you're either looking at that very steep upward angle, like where you're on the ground looking up, or if you are looking downward, like in a tall building, looking down at that slight angle. And then as you work through, you're going to refer to each of those vanishing points to figure out kind of each side. With kind of this small of a paper, it is going to feel much more skewed and kind of distorted, since oftentimes with 3-point perspective, you're going to have kind of that one really long angle for your height. With a smaller building like this, it is going to look a little bit more kind of distorted and abstracted, but it's kind of the same concept if you decide you are going to be working with either a more urban setting or kind of skyscrapers for your final project. So same thing with this. As you go through, just going to make sure you are continually referring to your vanishing points. 3-point perspective can be a little bit more challenging, just since you are going to refer to the vanishing point for those vertical lines instead, or those lines that establish height. So you won't really see any true kind of just on their own vertical lines anymore. They are all going to be extending to that vanishing point. So I'd say just kind of keep that in mind as you go through, especially since 2-point and 3-point perspective have kind of very similar approaches with kind of the horizon line and those two vanishing points. It's easy to switch back to just kind of those vertical lines. So as you get kind of those height lines, just kind of double check, make sure you are looking at that vanishing point either on the top or bottom. Otherwise, same as with 2-point perspective, if you're having issues, make sure that you're asking those questions sooner than later so you're not struggling unnecessarily. And then as you work through, kind of same concept of finding centers, you can use that X method to figure out kind of where the center of each of those planes are, and then utilize that as you start to lay out those things like doors, windows that are centralized in the building versus either off to the side or spaced out. But that should be everything. Let me know if you have questions as you're going through. Perspective is kind of one of those things that does take a little bit of a learning curve. So do ask those questions sooner than later so we can figure those either inconsistencies or areas out earlier in the process than later.